So once again, I'm Russ Feldhausen. I'm from the Department of Computer Science at Kansas State University. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we use tools like HUGO and other free tools to develop the online educational resources that we use in the computer science department. I'm going to preface this a little bit by saying that you do notice that I am from a computer science department, and computer science tends to be a little different. One of the things that makes computer science different is the faculty that we work with have a high level of technical skill. And so for them, developing a website in raw HTML and posting it to a server is something they've been doing for most of their career. And so I have to be careful when I say these free tools are easy to use. They're easy for technical people to use. I think they are easy for anybody to use. And I'm going to go through this process a little bit quickly just to get everything set up. But my goal is within the next half hour, I'm going to explain a little bit about why we chose the tools we use. And I'm going to give you a quick demo of how to use these tools to create your own open resource and then actually get it live on a website using GitHub. So it's a lot to get done in a half hour. As I'm going, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. We will get to them at the end. I'd love to hear from you. I love having good discussions at the end of these presentations. So with that, I'm going to get started. So to briefly talk about the task that I was given about 4 years ago at this point, I was hired at K-State to help them develop a flexible online curriculum for computer science that was focused on non-computer science majors. We saw that as a real growth area for our curriculum, and we wanted to do so in a way that was very fluid, very extensible, so that we could cover a lot of students without having to hire a bunch of new faculty. And so we're looking at how we can develop online resources and tools that we can use with this curriculum. And then eventually we wanted to take this curriculum to high schools. And that's actually the big part of what we're doing now, is figuring out how to take these same resources and offer them to high schools across the state of Kansas. So the question that I had was, how can we create these great online resources for computer science that are easy for us as faculty members to use and maintain, and are also easily accessible to our students wherever they're at? And that's really the question that I pondered on. I probably spent 6 months answering this question for various different classes that we were trying to develop. And at the time, around 2017, we used a lot of different tools at K-State to present content to our students. One of the major tools we used was Instructure Canvas. That's our LMS. And Canvas, of course, has the ability to create HTML pages. And so this real quick is our LMS. This is a test page that we can create in Canvas. And it works well. It's an HTML page. It has a what you see is what you get, or a WYSIWYG HTML editor. And it can do some things. This is just some test stuff here. But for us, the big thing we were really concerned about is presenting computer code in a way that's easy for our students to read and understand. And we found that Canvas was very limited in this. It only really presented the code in a mono space text. It didn't have any coloration. It didn't have any context awareness. And teachers that use this tool to develop pages for their classes found it to be very difficult to maintain. If you imagine a class textbook might have 100 pages in it, maintaining 100 separate HTML pages in Canvas and then transferring them from course to course wasn't really easy. And then, of course, it was very locked into the Canvas platform. And so after students got done with this class, they couldn't access these resources unless they downloaded them or something. And so it wasn't really an ideal situation for us. Outside of that, in the world of computer science, there were, of course, the expensive published textbooks that were available. When I was an undergraduate in the mid-2000s, that was what we had. We spent $100 to $150 each on textbooks to teach us programming languages. Programming, there's a lot of disjointed online resources, everything from Wikipedia to Stack Overflow. We had a lot of faculty members that used the tool LaTeX, or LaTeX, depending on how you pronounce it, to produce their work. And so a good example of that is one of our faculty members developed an algorithms textbook that is written completely in LaTeX, and it's a great textbook. But as we get into the modern times, we want to provide our students with something better than just a PDF of flat text like we have here. This is still one of the best algorithms textbooks you'll ever find, but it's not as flexible for students as what we'd like to present. So we were looking for ways that we could build new educational resources that were easy for us to maintain and were really useful and could use a lot of the new features that were available on the internet at that time. And so like I talked about, we couldn't have formatted programming code. Public access was a problem. Accessibility is another huge problem that we're trying to focus on. Computer science tools are very notoriously not very accessible, and we wanted to make sure that our educational resources were as accessible as we can make them, and actually had flexibility to add additional accessibility features at the time. And then, of course, cost is something we want. We want to bring down the cost for our students. We want to bring down the cost to develop for faculty. And we really want to find something that faculty find easy to write their code. I think that was one of the #1 things is faculty would complain that developing their own resources in the existing tools made it very difficult. It was difficult to write quickly, and it was difficult to format things in a way that were presented cleanly to the students. We are not graphic designers by any means. And so anything that we can do to help us present content very quickly and efficiently is really good for us. So at that time, there were a lot of industry tools that were taking off that had really solved this problem. Some of the tools that you may be familiar with are Git and GitHub, which is an online repository for computer code. It has a lot of great features on it. For example, this is a project I wrote that is formatted on GitHub. And as you can see, the code is formatted with this colorization that allows it to be easily read by people that are familiar with computer code. It breaks out the different parts of the code using some colors and some formatting to make it easier to read. And at the same time, there are tools like Stack Overflow that had fixed this code formatting problem. There are websites such as RealPython that not only had code, but sometimes they even have codes that you can click the button and actually run the code directly in the website. And so there were a lot of features that other people had solved that we kept asking ourselves, why can't we build tools that allow us to do these same things for our educational resources? And so we really wanted code that was formatted, that was publicly accessible, that was accessible to students. It was easy for us to write and maintain. And then the other big thing we wanted is we wanted something that was portable. In computer science, our field is changing very, very quickly. And over the years, we have been burned several times by tools that we really dove into, we thought were great. And then 2 or 3 years later, either the tool is abandoned or it's bought out or it's replaced. And then we have to shift all of our content to something else. And so we're very cognizant of the fact that things change very quickly. And so we want to find a way to present online resources today that will also leave the content portable so we could do something else in the future. So what we ended up stumbling upon is a tool called HUGO. HUGO is what they call a static site generator. The other big one that's out there is a tool called Jekyll. And what it does is you write content in a simple language, in this case, Markdown, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then what HUGO will do is it will take your Markdown content and then run it through a theme and a templating system, and it will generate a website for you based on that content that's written in Markdown. HUGO itself is very extensible. It's very themable. For those of you that know programming, HUGO can do a lot of stuff. The back end is all written in a programming language called Go, which is really easy to learn. And so we found HUGO to be exactly the tool that we wanted to do this. And so what I'm going to try and demonstrate here over the next 20 minutes is how to quickly get up to speed with a site that's built on HUGO and get it presented online. Before we do that, though, one thing to talk about is Markdown. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Markdown, but it's something that is very common in computer science nowadays. Markdown is actually a language that was developed all the way back in 2004, and it was developed as a syntax for formatting plain text. Before 2004, if you were writing code for a website, you were probably using raw HTML tags. And while that works very well, it's very difficult to type quickly. And so they created a Markdown as a way to quickly type out your formatting using plain text. And then there's a converter that converts that to the equivalent HTML. It makes it really easy to read the text in a very raw format, and it's also very easy to write on a keyboard, and it makes it very portable. As long as it's written in Markdown, you can change the tool that's converting it to HTML to just about anything. So if you want to play around with Markdown, a great Markdown editor that you can find is a tool called Stack Edit. And so if you want, you can pull up a web browser and another screen and go to stackedit.io. And I'm going to briefly bring that tool up here real quick. So Stack Edit gives you a quick view of what Markdown looks like. So in Markdown, we have special characters like the hash symbol that are used to make headers. So to make an HTML H1 header, you put one hash symbol. For an H2, it's 2. For an H3, it's 3. For an H4, it's 4. And so you just use these hash symbols for your headers. If you want to bold something, it's in two asterisks. If you want to italic something, you put two underscores around it. If you want to make it into code, you put a tick mark or a back tick, which is the tilde key. If you're not familiar, it's a strange key on your keyboard. You can do tons and tons of things in Markdown. There's a very, very quick way to learn Markdown. It will do inline quotes. And there are some extensions for Markdown to do things like tables, to do LaTeX. So if you're a math teacher or a science teacher and you want to have really nicely formatted formulas, you can use LaTeX to do that. And for us computer science folks, it will also do things like diagrams and flowcharts directly out of the text. And so Markdown is used very commonly across a lot of computer science tools. GitHub natively uses Markdown for a lot of things. If you're used to using Discord, or maybe you have kids or students that use Discord, a lot of the Discord messages can be formatted using Markdown as well. And so it's a really interesting language to learn to really quickly produce content. And so by learning Markdown, and a lot of computer scientists already know Markdown in some fashion, we can then use that to create an open resource. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly go through a demo of using HUGO to get up and running with a quick educational resource. I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, mainly because there's a lot of tools that you may have to quickly brush up on if you want to do exactly what I do. But this session is being recorded. You can always go back and watch the recording and do what I do a little bit later, or feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to fill in any gaps that you want. But the tools I'm going to use HUGO, I'm going to use Git and GitHub. The easiest way to install Git is installing GitHub Desktop on whatever system you have. And then I'm going to use Visual Studio Code as my text editor. You can use Notepad++ or Atom or Sublime or any programmer's text editor that you're used to. But what I'm going to do is walk you through the process of getting started using HUGO. So to use HUGO, first you have to install HUGO locally. And so if you go to the HUGO website, they have a great button here that says Quick Start, and it will walk you through the basic steps of installing HUGO. HUGO is kind of written for programmers, and so their instructions are written for Mac OS or Linux. If you're running on Windows, all you have to do is follow this install link and then go to their webpage to download the installer for HUGO. So you'll get here, they have all of their different versions, and for Windows, you need the Windows 64-bit. And then once you've downloaded that, you can extract that and you'll be brought to this hugo.exe. It doesn't have an installer or anything. It's really easy to use. And so this is the one and only time that I tell people the easiest way to install HUGO is to get the hugo.exe and drag and drop it into your Windows folder. So C:/Windows, we'll drop it right there. And that installs HUGO on your system. That's all you have to do. Anytime you want to update it, download the latest version of HUGO, drop the new version in your Windows folder on top of the other one, and you're good to go. So that installs the HUGO tool. And so once we've installed HUGO, the next step is to create a new website using HUGO. And so in Windows, I can open up my command prompt, and I'm just going to put this in my projects folder. So I'm going to do CD projects, and then I can type in the command HUGO new site, and I'm going to call this OER Summit. Whoops, I need to close and reopen that because I just installed HUGO. Oh, whoops, did I not get HUGO in my Windows folder? No, I didn't. Whoops. I did this yesterday and this should work. My apologies. I think I dropped it in the wrong folder. I want to put HUGO in the Windows folder. There we go. Now we got it. Okay. So again, what I'm going to do is HUGO new site OER Summit, and that will create a new site called OER Summit in my projects folder. I've got my projects folder open right here. And so it creates this OER Summit, and it has a whole bunch of stuff in here that is the basic layout of a HUGO site. But the one that you're most interested in is this content folder. This is where you'll actually put all of the markdown that you're going to work. So I'm going to open up that OER Summit page, and then I'm going to create a new page there by adding some content. So here back behind me, I can do HUGO new post. So I'm going to do HUGO new posts, first posts.md, and that will create that new first post. And then I can open it in code. But before we do that, we probably also want to get a theme. HUGO doesn't actually do a whole lot unless you get a theme for HUGO. And so there is a really nice website called themes.gohugo.io that has tons and tons of themes that you can choose from for your HUGO website. I'm going to use HUGO Theme Learn, which is a really nice theme for making documentation and textbook websites. And so I can just click this download link. It takes me to GitHub, and then I can download a zip file of the whole theme, which I've already done. And so in my downloads folder, I have this HUGO theme right here. And so all I have to do is take that HUGO theme and put it inside of the themes folder on HUGO. So I've got this themes folder. I'm just going to move that over, and I'm just going to call this Learn so that it's easy to see. So inside of my HUGO page, I've got a themes, and I have the Learn theme installed. So I'm good to go there. And so with the theme installed, I can now edit my website. So I'm going to use VS Code, which is really great. If you've got it installed, you just type code and a period, and it will open up Visual Studio Code in the current folder. And so I'll bring this over here so we can see it. So this is Visual Studio Code. It's a really nice text editor for programmers. And you can see over here, it already has all of my content set up from that website. So to make some content in this first post.md that I created, I can put in whatever markdown I want. So I can put in some text. I can have a list item. So I can do list 1. What's really nice is I don't actually have to number these because HUGO will take care of that automatically. I can put some Python code. And I can do all sorts of other stuff on this page. So there's just some really quick markdown. In HUGO, you can create multiple pages. You can create folders, all using that HUGO new command. And then once I've done that, I can create the website itself by using my terminal. I've got a terminal open here in the bottom. And to test your website, all you have to do is type HUGO-D and then serve. And so what that will do is that will serve up this website. The -D means that it includes drafts. I have drafts right now, and it loads it at localhost :1313. So if I go to my web browser, go to localhost :1313, I should be able to see my site, but I don't quite have everything set up yet because I need to add my theme. So to add my theme, I'm going to say my theme is theme learn. And then I'm going to rebuild my site real quick. And now I should be able to see it. So that's all it takes to get your website up and running. I click first post. Here is my first post that I created on that textbook. From there, I can create new pages, I can create folders, I can create structure. The HUGO website has great documentation for how to go through all of this and to set up your site. I did notice that this is, there used to be a logo here. They actually just posted an update where they're trying to add more languages to their theme. And I think they have a bug where they're getting the wrong language for the logo, but that's something that's easily fixed. In fact, you can very quickly fix anything that you don't like in the theme by duplicating it outside of the theme. So if I look at theme layouts and then look at partials and then logo, here's where the logo is. And so outside of the themes, all I have to do is go to the same folder path. So I need layouts and then make a new folder, partials, and then make a new file, logo.html. And so as long as I duplicate the same file outside of the theme, I can overwrite it and say, this is my logo. I can put my logo there. And now if I go back here, I've just created my logo. And so that's the really extensible part of HUGO. Anytime there's something in the theme you don't like or you want to change, you just have to find it in the theme, create the same file outside of the theme, and then you can make it whatever you want. It makes it a really, really flexible system. And that way, even as you update the themes, it will still use your overridden stuff later on. So that's the first part, is all it takes to actually get your site rendered and published. Once you have done that, all you have to do is run the HUGO-D command, and it will actually create your website. And what it does is in your website's folder, it will create a folder right here called public. And so this public folder that it creates, you'll notice it has index.html and it has all this other stuff. This is the actual website that HUGO creates. And so at this point, if you have access to a web server that you know how to get to via an FTP or SSH or some other tool, or your department has a web server, all they have to do is copy this public folder onto the web server, and that's your website. And so HUGO makes it really easy to write stuff in Markdown, get a theme, get a template set up, create the HTML for your website, and then nearly any web hosting provider can then take this website and post it for you publicly, so you've got your textbook ready to go. I like this because it really works well for groups that don't have a whole lot of technical content or technical people. As long as they know how to produce a website, you've got the content you need right here. So if you want to do it yourself, there's a really great way you can do that, and that is using GitHub. One of the things that GitHub does is it allows you to actually host a website off of a Git repository completely for free. And so with a little bit of know-how, you can build your own website via GitHub for free with just a few clicks. And so I'm briefly going to go through that. I'm going to go here to my GitHub. And again, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but you can follow along, or there's great tutorials on how to use Git. I'm just going to create a new repository. I'm going to call this OER Summit. I'm going to make it public, and I'm not going to initialize it. That will create me a repository. And then they give you these really helpful commands to set things up. I'm going to do the git init command myself, but I'm going to use the rest of these. So I'm just going to copy those, go back over here. I'm going to do git init, and then I'm going to do git add all of the files that I just created. And then I'm going to paste in the rest of those commands, and that will git commit and git push and put everything on GitHub. And so with those few commands, I now have my website out here on GitHub. So once you've got it out on GitHub, you can go to settings, pages, and I'm going to say, I want to make pages off of my main site at the docs folder, and hit save. And that will set up GitHub so that the next time I add content to this, anything in the docs folder will get published out as my website. So with that, I can go back here to Visual Studio, and I have to do a slightly different HUGO command. This time I'm going to go HUGO -D to do drafts, -d and docs. And what that tells HUGO is I want to publish with all of my drafts, and I want to publish it in the destination docs. And so instead of putting it in the public folder, it will put it in the docs folder. So I'll run that command real quick. And then to make things clean, you'll notice now I've got this docs folder that has the same content. So I'm just going to delete this publics folder because we don't need it anymore. And so once again in Git, I'm just going to add everything to git commits, website, and git push. So I do a git push, that will push that to Git. And then if I go back to my GitHub and refresh this, it's building the GitHub pages, but it says it failed because it doesn't quite have everything it needs, but we're almost there. So in this docs folder, we've got everything set up. Let's see if it will render GitHub pages. It fails for some reason. Anyway, I will go through and fix the other things. So I don't know why that failed, but once it goes through, oh, it's still building. There it goes. It's just a little slow. Okay, so as soon as that deploys, I'll be able to actually show you the GitHub pages in live format. The first time you deploy it, it takes a couple of minutes. Afterwards, it will go really quickly. There it goes. So I can view it, but notice that all of my content went away. And this is one of the weird bugs in HUGO, is if you're putting it inside of a subsite, so if it's in a folder, you need to actually change one thing in your configuration, where in HUGO, I have to go to config and I have to add canonify URLs equals true. And so by telling GitHub to canonify my URLs and then setting the page to the actual URL, what that will do is that tells HUGO to make sure that all the URLs work with that base URL. And so whatever your URL is of your website, you can place it right here, set it to canonify your URL so that it works with that. And then I should be able to do my HUGO command again. And then add commits. And then push. And all of that Git process is very standard. If you go through Git, you can do Git add, Git commit, Git push, very simple. And so that will re-render the website under this URL, which is the URL I got from GitHub. And after a little bit, it should redeploy. It may take it just a moment. This is the fun part of doing a live demo, is watching it as Git actually runs its build process. Git is pretty quick, but sometimes it takes about a minute to get these Git build processes to go through. But once that completes, we should see our website out in the real world at this GitHub URL. And so that can become your open educational resource textbook URL that you can share with your students. And so it's a really quick process, but it's worth noting that you don't need access to a web server or web hosting or any special tools to do any of this. If you tinker a little bit with HUGO, you learn how to use Git and GitHub, it will take care of all of your web hosting for you. It's really kind of cool what it will do. Let's see if it's posted. There we go. So there is our HUGO website out in the real world, running on right now my page, rusfeld.github.io. Again, you can do some reading up on GitHub and actually replace this URL with whatever URL you want to use, and it will host it for you. It's really cool. So jumping back to my presentation, what we have done out of this is we have actually built our own theme in HUGO based on that HUGO theme learn that I just showed you, and we call it KSUCS HUGO theme. And so if I go to my actual website, this is what our theme looks like. You'll notice that it uses K-State Purple and it has some other K-State formatting to it, but it allows us to do all sorts of cool things. We can play around with the different HTML that it has available. It has some what are called short codes, so we can create things like these disclaimers. We can include other files. We can include links really cleanly. There's tons of things we can do. It even supports this tool called Quiz Down. So we can actually create quizzes directly in our textbook. These quizzes, they don't register anywhere. They're just for students to check their understanding, but they make a good review at the end of a module. Some other features that we add, we had students that asked us for dark mode. And so we added a dark mode to our theme so that students can now read our textbook in dark mode. And believe me, it took me like 30 minutes to write this, and students have loved the fact that we have dark mode on our textbooks now. We also use these pages embedded in Canvas. And so up here at the top, there is a link that says embed this page. It takes away all of the extra framing and just presents the content of the page itself. And then we can embed this inside of tools like Canvas or Codio or a web browser or any other tool that we want. So we can host our textbook with HUGO, present it in another format using this embed. The other thing that we use is we use these textbooks to record videos. And so we have another button up here for teleprompter that gives us a teleprompter view, and it even has an auto scroll. And so we can load this on a mirrored teleprompter that we have in our video studio, and we can use this to record our videos by reading our textbook content. It's a really neat little tool that we've developed. There's also a link right here for any of these textbooks. If there is an error or any sort of thing that needs changed, there's a button right here that says edit this page. And for our students, it will take them directly to the repository where the textbook content is stored. They can propose an edit, submit it as a bug, and then they can get extra credit points for helping us continue to edit our textbooks and make them even better over time. So that's what we have developed at K-State, is our own textbook system. For example, this is an assignment that I literally released to students yesterday about a compound interest calculator. And it allows students to go through. We've got call outs for the learning objectives. We have math formulas. We have code examples. We can have little textbook asides where we give some more information, all directly through this textbook format. And then we can take this page, embed it in Canvas, embed it in whatever tools they're using, and present it to students. But because it's outside of any of those tools, it's hosted at textbooks.cs.ksu.edu. Our students have access to that textbook into the future, so they can always refer back to things that they're familiar with that they have used in their classes. There are some other tools that we use that I didn't get a whole lot of time to talk about. One of the things is diagrams.net, and I'm just going to pull some of these up in a web browser. Diagrams.net is a really cool free diagramming tool for making flowcharts, UML diagrams. It works really well. It has a downloadable version. It's totally free. If you're familiar with tools like Microsoft Visio, this does a lot of the same things. One of the things I really like about diagrams.net is it has an option where when you download a PNG image of your diagram, it can embed the source of the diagram in that image. And so later on, if you need to edit that diagram, you can load that image in diagrams.net. It will get the diagram out of it, and then you can make changes to it. We use a tool called Codio. This one is not free, but this is an online IDE for learning. So if you teach computer science, Codio is a really cool tool that you can use. For free, you can use another tool called Replit, R-E-P-L-I-T. It is an online IDE for programming that is totally free. And so for students that want to play around with programming in a web browser, they don't want to install stuff. If your school has things like Chromebooks or iPads, Replit works really well for that. Other tools that I've used, right now, my camera is going through OBS Studio. And so when I want to put that cool bottom third at the bottom of my video, I'm doing that in OBS Studio. If you want to record videos at home, you can do that. I'm literally sitting at my desk, but this is also my recording studio when I need to record stuff for my students. For video editing, we've used a tool called DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci itself is not free, but the free version works really well. It's a great video editor. It does lots of things that you need to do very quickly. And then once we create the videos, we use a tool called Otter to actually generate the transcripts for the videos. One of the big things for me is any video that I intend to use more than once should have a full closed caption transcript with it. Otter is a really neat tool. For $5 a month. We can upload up to, I think, 10,000 minutes of video and get it captioned. And it does a pretty good job. It does way better than YouTube at closed captioning. And then we can quickly make those captions available on YouTube or wherever we post it. The other tool I'm going to talk about real quick, if you do like Markdown and you want to use Markdown elsewhere, a tool that I really recommend is Obsidian. Obsidian is a note-taking tool that writes in Markdown. And so you can write all of your notes in Markdown. And one of the cool things about Obsidian is it will help as you link between your different notes pages, it will help create this knowledge graph of all of your notes. And so, for example, I use Obsidian for nothing else than keeping track of recipes. But here are my recipes for my Thanksgiving that are kept in my notepad on Obsidian. So there's lots and lots of free tools out there that use Markdown or that work with the different setups that we're using. But those are just some of the things that we have learned how to use over the last few years to create really cool online content for our students. And between using HUGO and the video recording tools and the diagrams, we can present really nice diagrams, really nice videos, really nice textbook content that basically doesn't cost us anything to create or host. It just costs us the time and effort to actually build them out. So that's all I've got for my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in chat or let me know. I'd love to chat with you about them. I really love sharing all of the things that I have learned about creating open educational resources for computer science. If you want to find me online, if you look for Russ Feld, you can find me on almost every social network that I have been on using that name. And then this talk is available both on the website for this conference, and it's also at my website, russfeld.me/talks. And a quick shameless plug for my website. If you want to see what HUGO can do, this website is also built using HUGO. And so it gives you an example of what it would look like to run a blog that has things. I've got a blog section. I have a section for teaching that has a lot of my curriculum posted on it. I like to cook, so I have a recipe blog as well. This is all done via HUGO. All of the sources available. You can find it outside on GitHub. So feel free to check it out. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing and get back to Zoom and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Russell. I don't see any yet, but we'll watch for them to come in these last 5 minutes.
All right. I do see the comment earlier, the teleprompter. Yes, that is like one of the biggest things that we got out of this was figuring out how to do the teleprompter. You can't see it, but back behind me, I actually have it's a picture frame mounted at 45 degrees, and I have a Amazon Kindle Fire, like the $40 Kindle Fire. And so I load that website up on the tablet and tap it, and it will start scrolling, and I use that as my teleprompter. And so instead of buying a $500 fancy teleprompter, it was Hobby Lobby and 20 bucks and some duct tape, and I got a teleprompter. So yes, if someone wants to get me in touch with whoever is interested in that, I'm more than happy to talk to somebody else. And yeah, I would love to share information. You know, at K-State, we have weekly teaching talks that are hosted by our Teaching Learning Center. Every once in a while, we'll talk about cool technical topics like this. Last week, we had Scott Finkeldye, who was our presenter. He's one of the video experts at K-State and talked about how to create and host good online videos. Hopefully it's pretty cool. So any questions, any comments, anything you want to chat about? Like I said, I apologize. I went super fast through that. It's a lot to cover in a half hour. Feel free to go back and watch the video a little bit slower and pause it. That's what I tell my students to do, is I will walk through a demonstration and tell them the beauty of YouTube is you can go faster if you want, or you can go slower if you want. Oh, thank you. I see in the chat, I have a contact. I will try and reach out and see if we can make a connection. Yes, the URL. Which URL is needed? I will happily post whichever ones. Yes. My website is that, rusfeld.me. If you Google some amalgamation of my name, I think I'm the only person with my name that exists on the internet. I won't say I'm the only person with my name in the world, but if you get something close to Russell Feldhausen in Google, you should find me very easily. It's a benefit of having been in computer science. All right.
Russell, it doesn't look like there's any other questions coming in right now, so we will stop the recording and go ahead and end the meeting then.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.